Once again, my name is Ed Zamora from Principia Prep. I've been in the world of college advising, so on and so forth, for over 24 years now. So if you guys have any questions about the presentation, once again, just ask in the Q&A. I will be able to answer any questions you have as we go through the presentation. As well as today, we're going to be going through basically the college aid process. So this meeting is mostly for the juniors and the seniors, getting you guys ready for everything that's going on. Just to give you guys an overlap, many of you may or may not know that the financial aid process is going to have a dramatic change next academic year for the October 22 Fafsa Form. This year's Fafsa Form, which becomes available on October 1st of 2021 here, this will have all the same format, all the same stuff that happened in years prior. All the changes are going to go into effect next academic year for the October 1st, 2022 Fafsa Form. In this presentation, I'm going to do kind of an interesting take where I'm going to tell you guys everything that's going to be happening this year for you guys. So all the senior parents filling out the forms this year, I'm going to explain what's happening this year. For the seniors as well, of course, the junior parents for next academic year when you guys are filling out the FAFSA form for both groups, I'm going to explain to you guys all the differences, all the changes from the forms, deadlines, due dates, how the CARE Act has come into effect. I'm going to explain basically everything. I'm also going to be explaining today the differences between SAT optional as far as the financial aid and admissions are concerned. I will also be going over different scams to try to avoid, as well as I'm going to discuss with you guys student loans, the forgiveness everyone's talking about, as well as financial aid resources out there. So to start off everything off, basically, many of you may or may not know if you read the information sent to you about today's presentation. We actually do have a scholarship program we just started this academic year for this year's senior class. Basically, all you need to do is go to the YouTube channel that we have, and I'll show you the YouTube channel in a moment. Watch the video, and the video explains how to receive the scholarship funds we're looking to give out. Our goal is to give away at least $10,000. We're hoping to exceed that and give away $15,000, if not more, this academic year for the senior class 21-22. Here's the YouTube channel. If you guys were on here last year, you know the channel's grown pretty quickly. We have almost 90 videos now. We've added a lot of videos. So I have videos on here about avoiding scams. I have videos about what's going to happen more than likely with the loan forgiveness. I have videos on here about SAT optional schools, how early decision, early action affect financial aid. So all the questions you guys typically ask me, I just make videos for you guys just to jump on the YouTube channel and watch. Now, for those watching here, if you like, the easiest way to help us for the scholarship fund, because the scholarship fund is basically based on revenue from YouTube. So the easiest way to help us, and I show everyone this, is just go down halfway down the page. If you guys click on the play all box and just let the videos run, the more videos that play, the more revenue we get, the more we're able to give out more scholarship funds. This is why I always tell everyone in the beginning, if you want to help our cause, very simple, to help us be able to do these presentations and help parents and answer questions, all you really need to do is go to the YouTube channel, click the play all button and let it play. That's what's funding our scholarship drive for this year, if those are wondering. Now let me go back to the presentation. So that's basically the YouTube channel. Obviously, we have a lot of information on here, so you want more information about work study, early action, early decision, all the stuff. We have videos for you guys. That's the best way you guys can help our organization and you guys as well in getting scholarship funds. That being said, let's start off today's presentation by me going into a bigger in-depth process about what the changes will be. Right off the bat, there have been humongous amounts of money provided to the colleges by the federal government through the CARES Act and a couple other things that have happened through Congress, Senate, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the universities have a lot of money to help you guys out. So if you have a student in college now and you have a job loss, or you're getting unemployment, or your business has gone under, or anything else has gone out or is happening, or if you're a senior parent right now applying to colleges, recognize that colleges have a lot of money to help you guys out. As well as a lot of people have asked, and we actually, one of our most popular videos on YouTube has almost 100,000 views, is about the loan forgiveness. Now, for seniors going into college this year, what you guys need to recognize is that the interest rates on the college loans are at all-time lows right now. Right now, you're talking about loan interest rates at under 5%, which historically never happens, either through the private side or the federal side, because the interest rates have dropped so low. A lot of interest rates on the loans themselves, the federal loans specifically, are so cheap that many parents, many students are taking the federal loans provided to them by the federal government, i.e. through the college. So another benefit of what's going on through the CARES Act and a few other things is interest rates are extremely low to be able to borrow. In addition to that, a new aspect that's basically come out in the last couple of months, now everyone probably already knows about the taxable implication that if you had unemployment and you made under 150,000, the first 10,200 of unemployment doesn't count towards taxation. In the world of financial aid, typically unemployment income does count as income. However, under the new guidelines from the U.S. Department of Education, colleges are now able to forgo any unemployment you're getting, whether it's under the $10,200 taxable amount or even over the $10,200 taxable amount. The colleges can use a process called professional judgment to actually back out your unemployment. So if you aren't able to work or weren't able to work or something happened and you were collecting unemployment, that unemployment income no longer would be used against you if you basically appeal the college, letting them know that obviously I need this money coming in. So I'm going to be talking about appeals office in a moment, but something to have in the back of your mind, if you've lost your job or you're in the process of losing your job or something has happened where the unemployment is in effect for you guys, you do have a lot of resources now to help you guys out, specifically from the financial aid section of the colleges. In addition, additional changes, more stuff happening. The FAFSA form this year, when you guys open up the FAFSA form for senior parents, because junior parents, by the way, you guys don't fill out any forms. Starting October 1st of this year, for senior parents, that's when you can start the FAFSA form. The FAFSA form is not changing this year. It will change next year, October 1st of 2022. That's when the FAFSA form will have major changes. First change, they're going to shrink the FAFSA. Typically, the FAFSA is anywhere between 95 to around 110 questions, depending on how you answer some questions. More questions pop up. The FAFSA form is going to be shrunk down to roughly around 40 questions from the 100 mark or so. In addition, starting this year, you no longer, if you're a male student filling out the FAFSA form, you no longer have to sign up for selective service to be eligible for financial aid. That's something that took hold this year. If you're collecting veterans benefits or workers' comp, those also no longer count in the FAFSA form. Two major changes, unfortunately. This year would be the last year that multiple students in college will count on the FAFSA. This year will also be the last year that separated or divorced parents can choose who gets put on the FAFSA, which parent gets put on. I'm going to go into further detail into both of these. That's why I made them yellow, because obviously the big changes. I'm going to go into in-depth on both of these. I have slides on just both of these. I just want to get you kind of in the mindset. These are the big changes that are happening. Now, what's happening also is the FAFSA form is indicated they're decreasing their parent asset protections, which basically means a certain amount of money you guys have outside of retirement, they typically don't count. That number is dropping by like 50%. I'm going to explain to you guys what that means also in a different slide, as well as the income protections you guys have as parents are increasing to 20%, and the students' income protections are increasing to 50%. Now, if you don't know everything I'm talking about just yet, don't worry. I'm just going over these things as an outline. I'm going to go into in-depth for every one of these things, more in-depth, obviously. Now, that being said, let's jump right into when the actual financial aid process starts. What most families don't realize is you're technically already in the financial aid process, because in the world of financial aid admissions, the two of them have actually basically collided, almost becoming the same thing. And this is what I mean. The first place you're going to be asked to do financial questions, etc., will actually be on your students' applications for admissions. On the Common App, which you can see on the screen right here, I actually screenshotted the page where they ask you, and by the way, they're going to ask you this question for every single college on almost every single application. The question is, you see down below, actually highlighted in light blue, down below, do you intend to apply for need-based financial aid? That's their way of asking you, essentially, are you applying for the FAFSA form? Are you applying for the CSS Profile form? Are you applying for any financial aid assistance whatsoever on the need-based side? Now, there's always questions that parents ask us, why are they asking this question, and is this going to be used against us for financial aid consideration? Now, most schools, to be honest with you, don't care if you indicate yes here. And the way I always tell parents to look at it is this. If you need financial assistance, if you need help, if you've done the net price calculator, if you don't know what the net price calculator is, don't worry, I have a video on YouTube for that, but I also talk about it here as well. I have a slide just for the net price calculator. If you've done the net price calculator and you realize based on your financial situation, this college is going to give you financial assistance, they're going to help you out with grant money, then yes, you always check off, yes, I'm applying for financial assistance. If you've done the net price calculator and it indicates that you can afford to pay more than the college cost, then if you like to, you can say no here. Even if you say yes or no here, by the way, you can still fill out the FAFSA form, something most people don't realize. I'm going to explain that in further detail in a moment. If you need financial help, always click yes here. You're looking for financial assistance. Now, there are some schools out there, good, bad, or indifferent, that will use you needing financial assistance as one of the factors of the admissions process. They look into it as, can the student afford or not? But typically the way it works, because everyone wants to know if we automatically say yes, we just knocked out of the box, not the way it works. Most of the time, the way it works is you essentially have, let's say, 10 spots left, okay? And they have 40 students left they're considering. And of those 10 spots and those 40 students, if 10 students indicated they don't need financial assistance, they're going to look at those 10 students first as options before they go into the students who are looking for financial aid consideration. But I always tell parents, if you need financial aid help, always check, yes, I'm looking for financial assistance. That being said, let's go into building your college list. So this is kind of the juniors and the seniors, because seniors by now should have a college list in place, even if it's a rough draft, kind of like starting off list. And juniors, obviously, you guys are starting to build your list. Now, when it comes to the building the college list, there's basically two ways of building the college list. There's the admissions way of building it and the financial aid way of building it. Let me explain the admissions first, because everyone really understands the admissions way. Admissions is basically you have a list of schools, and either the school is a safety school, which basically means your student's definitely going to get in, very likely. Then you have a target schools in the middle, like I like to call the 50-50s. A lot of people call it the match schools. We have a very good chance of getting in, but not a guarantee. And then you have the reach colleges, which are typically the harder schools to get into, the dream schools, the ones that need more rigorous courses, higher SATs, et cetera, et cetera. The way that admissions works is that way. You have a tier basis of safety, target, and reach schools. On the financial aid end, it typically kind of works backwards most of the time, where in cases that the safety schools are usually the most generous schools for your student from a financial aid perspective, because they want to entice your student to go there through scholarship consideration. So typically when you're building your college list, you want to kind of have both factors in play. Obviously, you want to have the safety schools just in case something doesn't work out, or obviously, a pandemic happens and your student can't leave, the state of New Jersey, like things that no one ever sees happening. So you always have to have a safety school no matter what. In this case of the safety schools, you want to look at the safety schools on the financial aid side this way. I want to find safety schools that, number one, obviously have the major my student wants and somewhere they want to go. And number two, offer a lot of scholarship consideration. Now, for those who are trying to figure out, okay, do my schools, the safety schools, or even the target schools, or even the reach schools, do they provide scholarship opportunities? Very simple. Contact the admissions office. The admissions office of every single college is your number one resource for scholarship consideration and information, because most people don't realize this. In the world of financial aid, the financial aid offices do not provide scholarships. It's the admissions offices that provide scholarships. So they have all the information about them. So your goal is obviously to figure out, contacting the admissions offices, number one, are we in scholarship consideration? You can even talk to an admissions person over the phone, by the way, and even ask them. Some of them even have it on their websites where you can do their net price calculators. It'll ask you for your students' GPA and test scores, and it'll advise you what kind of scholarship you're eligible for. Admissions is the key here for safety schools to try to figure out scholarship money, because you want to use the safety schools scholarship money as leverage to try to get more scholarship money out of the target and the reach colleges. So think of the safety schools as basically a hedge. Get as much money as you can from them. If you don't go there, let's use them as leverage to get more money out of everyone else. That's the way to think of the college list from the financial aid point of view. Now, that being said, let's talk about SATs and ACTs, because obviously with the pandemic and everything that happened, a ton of schools went SAT, ACT optional. Something around like 85% of schools were SAT, ACT optional. Now, a lot of schools have stayed SAT, ACT optional this year, many of which that most people did not think would, but actually did stay SAT, ACT optional. And a lot of parents keep asking, should we send test scores in? Should we not send test scores in? Right off the bat, I always tell parents, if you're uncertain, very simple. Contact your guidance office. They've had relationships with these colleges. They recognize whether you're 1,300 makes sense to send off to a Boston school, or if your 1,100 makes sense to send out to, let's say, Rutgers or TCNJ, or should we just go SAT optional across the board? Also, you can also check Naviance. Through the Naviance system, you'll get an idea through the scattergram what the median score is, what basically the middle score is. If the median score is above what you have, I typically don't send a score in. It doesn't make any sense, okay? Another person you can also ask is the admissions office. If you're able to, since everything's starting to open up again, thankfully, if you're able to do a meeting face-to-face with admissions officer, that's the person I'm asking. Here's our SAT, ACT scores. What do you think? Because face-to-face, they're super candid with you. If they have a score, let's say, of 1,100, and the person says, you know what, we typically bring in students with a 1,250 and above, that's their way of saying, don't send the scores in. Or if they say, 1,400 is really good, you're in scholarship level. That means send the SATs in, because you're probably going to get in, and you're probably going to more likely get a scholarship, because that's our level for scholarship funding. Those are the people asked, and then that information should then guide you in whether or not to send it. Now, let's say you don't score well. Let's say you've taken a test a couple times, or it's been canceled a couple times, and your students just had enough. They can't get to the score they want to get to, or they think they need to get to, or you think you need to get to. What you can do is, if you need more schools for your college list, this is where you guys go. This is called fairtest.org. On fairtest.org, obviously down the bottom is their website. On fairtest.org is a list of over 1,500 SAT, ACT optional colleges. I said before, a lot of schools said SAT, ACT optional. So if you need more help, if you need schools to figure out because your student doesn't test well, perfectly fine. Go here. These schools, I would say 8 out of 10 of these schools do not use it against you for scholarship consideration either from the financial aid point of view if you don't send test scores in. Some schools, however, like Muhlenberg in the past, have asked for additional documentation like a graded paper. Some schools will ask for an extra essay. So some schools have more stuff. Other schools have asked for interviews in the past, but with COVID and everything else, a lot of them have gotten away with that and have more asked for the graded paper. But if they are SAT, ACT optional, I would not be afraid of going SAT, ACT optional from both admissions and financial aid, by the way. That being said, let's talk cost. Now, one thing that kind of surprised me, probably surprised a lot of people in the world of college admissions and financial aid, is many of us thought because of the pandemic, the prices were going to just plummet. Even and I've been doing this 25 years, I figured this would be the first time that the colleges kind of like, they ran up to the wall, they pushed the limit of cost, and it didn't happen. I would say probably 5% of schools lowered the price or kept the school price the same, and then everyone else just raised the price up. Also, if you watch a YouTube video, you know that we did a video about a month ago. Prices are now going right back up to the way they used to go up, which is between 3 to 5% up every year, regardless of what the price is now. Now, obviously, if you're looking at the cost, everyone's kind of shocked by the cost, whether a pandemic happened or not. But to give you a perspective, here in the state of New Jersey, we are actually the most expensive state almost across the United States of almost everything. From a public school perspective, nationally speaking, the cost is typically for a public school $14,000 to $30,000. Here in the state of New Jersey, our cost for a public school typically ranges between $15,000 to around $35,000 for public school. On a private school level, here in New Jersey, our costs are also more expensive than the average of $35,000 to $50,000. Our average private schools cost $40,000 to $60,000. And then if you're talking in the higher elite, more expensive colleges, name brand, top tier, etc., you're talking about basically $70,000 being the new normal, unfortunately. As you see on here, I have a few schools, obviously a lot of people are used to as far as in the, obviously in the high school that you guys are coming from, as well as the New Jersey tri-state area. And one of the things that most parents don't realize is if you're a senior parent right now, this price is for this year's academic year. They will actually increase the price on the seniors one more time in May, the end of May, after you guys deposit, which means for juniors, you guys will be having 2 increases, one this upcoming May and one the upcoming May right before your student graduates. So it's very likely for junior students, your cost of college, room, board, tuition, the whole thing, there's going to be some colleges, believe it or not, they exceed $90,000. Okay, so yes, it's very expensive. Now, obviously, a lot of parents look at this and that's obviously and wonder, does it make sense to apply to these colleges because they're so expensive? And the reality is the top colleges here, as far as Columbia and Fordham, are extremely generous. Even though they cost $80,000, pretty much half the students that attend these universities typically pay about half the sticker price. So the first thing that you want to avoid that almost everyone makes that doesn't go to a financial aid presentation or doesn't talk to an admissions office or anything else or guidance is that you look at the price tag and you assume we can't afford it. You never look at the price tag, okay? Obviously, the price tag is shocking. It's part of the process, but you want to figure out if it costs $80, does it cost us $80? And that brings us to, let's begin the financial aid process. Let's discuss what the financial aid process actually means. Right at the bat, everyone needs to understand this. The term financial aid, you have to get this out of your mind immediately. The term financial aid does not mean free money. It's the first thing you have to get out of your mind. The term financial aid means 4 things. It means scholarships and grants, which are known as gift aid. You should write that down. It's a very important term. Then you also have loans and work study, which are self-help. All 4 of these things mean financial aid, which means if you're doing a Zoom meeting with the financial aid office or open house with the financial aid office, and you ask the person speaking, does your school offer a lot of financial aid? They're all going to say, yes, we offer financial aid, because they can all offer you federal loans. As long as you do the Fafsa Form, everyone's student is going to get a federal loan. So when you're talking to anyone about financial aid, you always want to use the term gift aid. So after the financial aid or admissions person says to you, yes, during that meeting, we do give out a lot of financial aid, the next question should always be, how much typically do you give out in gift aid? Remember, gift aid is the actual financial aid term for free money. That being said, let's talk about the breakdown. Like, how do they figure out how much you're supposed to pay towards the cost of college, and how does it work? Now, I'm going to give you both scenarios here. I'm going to give you this year's FAFSA information for this October 21, and next year's FAFSA information for October 22. Now, right off the bat, when you guys are filling out the financial aid forms, obviously every school has what's called a cost of attendance. When you're talking to the schools, whether it's Zoom, in person, etc., and you want to know from them specifically, what do you cost, everything included, room, board, the fees, everything, how much you guys cost, you always want to ask them, what is your cost of attendance? You should write that down. It's a very important term. I also have a video just on cost of attendance. Cost of attendance, I'll show you, goes into the next slide, is basically all the cost you will have for that academic year, both direct cost and indirect cost. Now, you take the cost of attendance, what the school costs, everything for 1 year, you subtract out what's called the expected family contribution. Now, the expected family contribution is the number they're going to give you at the end of the FAFSA form. So you complete the FAFSA form, and there at the end it's going to say, this is what your student, basically your family unit, expected family contribution number is. The expected family contribution number, by the way, is the minimum they expect you to pay towards the cost of college. The expected family contribution, think of it as just the bare minimum. This is the minimum amount we need to pay. We might have to pay more. We might only pay this amount, but this amount will be the starting point no matter what. You subtract out your expected family contribution from what the college's total cost is. What's left over is called your financial need. That financial need, that space there between what they cost and what you can afford to pay, the financial need is what the school should help you out with in scholarships, grants, loans, and work study. Remember the 4 parts of financial aid. One of the changes that's going to happen next academic year for October 22 is they're going to change the term expected family contribution to student aid index. That's it. They're just changing the name. I don't know why they're changing the name. It's completely ridiculous. They think it makes it easier for you guys to understand what it means. To me, it's exactly the same thing. So next year, the only difference is going to be after you finish the FAFSA is you're not going to see expected family contribution next year. You're going to see student aid index number, but it's exactly the same stuff as far as the equations and the way they work. That being said, let's talk about what goes into cost of attendance. When we're talking about cost of attendance, it's everything the school costs, both direct cost and indirect cost. Direct costs are what you're paying directly to the college: tuition, fees, room and board, etc. Indirect costs are costs you're incurring but not paying to the college, like personal expenses, a laptop, commuting to the college, books, a calculator, these kind of things. All these costs together encompass the cost of attendance. So when you're dealing with a school, you always want to make sure to ask them, what is your cost of attendance? I want to know the total cost. If they can't give you next year's cost of attendance, what you guys can do is just take whatever their cost of attendance is this academic year, 21-22, and just multiply it by 5%, and then just add that on top, because that's typically the highest level they'll go up, is anywhere from 3 to 5% increase every year. That being said, let's jump right into the financial aid form. So what financial aid forms do they need? Well, all of you guys here will do the form on the left called the FAFSA form. Now, the FAFSA form itself, once again, is open or is available starting October 1st. This is when you start the FAFSA form. Now, the form on the right is called the CSS Profile. Some of you, in addition to the FAFSA, will have to do the CSS Profile. The CSS Profile is only required by about 180 colleges. So, by the way, there's over 4,000 colleges out there, so most of them do not require the CSS. I'm going to talk about both forms in depth, by the way. The form on the left, by the way, everyone does the FAFSA form. This is where you guys will be filling out the FAFSA form on fafsa.ed.gov. Now, when you go onto the FAFSA form, and by the way, don't go on there before October 1st. I usually tell parents, don't go on to the FAFSA form anytime before October 3rd. Typically, October 1st and 2nd, the site crashes. It's like historically crashed every day the first day, because everyone jumps on thinking there's some kind of prize or some kind of award for being in the top 100, top 1,000. I've heard all kinds of myths that none of this stuff exists. Everyone thinks, first come, first serve. That hasn't existed in like 30 years, by the way, okay? So if you're doing the FAFSA form, when you're filling out the FAFSA form, everyone always asks, okay, so when should we do the form by? You have, I would say, between October 1st until roughly January 1st to do the form. So you have months and months and months. The only time you have to do this form early, and I mean early is typically by November 1st, is if you're doing early decision 1. Some schools require it also for restricted early action as well as first choice. but typically the earliest you technically have to do this form for freshmen, for seniors this year, is November 1st. So you have at least a month to get this form done. There's no rush to get this form done. Also, I have parents asking me all the time, if we're not done with admission stuff, should we send the financial aid forms in? Typically, I like to look at it this way. Send the admission stuff in first, then work on the financial aid stuff. Because in the world of financial aid, they're not going to look at your financial aid forms, even if you send everything in October 1st, until they get your student's application for admissions and they accept your student. Until your student's accepted, there is no one looking at your financial aid stuff. They won't, because they don't know if it actually makes sense to review your information. Now, when you jump on this form, as you can see on here, it has two white starting boxes. You can either start here as a new Fafsa form, or log in as returning user. What you want to do is obviously click on Start Here. The next page you're going to get is after you click on Start Here, is you're going to get basically what's known as the FS8 ID section. If you actually go to our YouTube channel, we actually made a YouTube video just for you guys. After you click on the Start Here box, if you go to our YouTube channel, we actually have a step-by-step process. I'll actually walk you through creating the actual FSA ID. It's very simple. So if you want just step-by-step guide rather than you just going in there and maybe making an error or two, just go on the YouTube channel, watch me walk step by step. Actually put my name in, you put your name in, put the social in, so on and so forth. You want to first start off with filling out the student's information. So first you log in and basically create the student's FSA ID. After you create the student's FSA ID, you want to go back in again and create the second ID, because you're going to need two IDs to fill out the FAFSA form. The second ID is the parent's FSA ID. So first ID is the student's ID. Use the student's ID when you come back to the FAFSA to log into the FAFSA. Use the second ID, the parent's ID, to sign the form at the end, as well as upload your taxes. You need two IDs. You can technically submit the FAFSA with only a student's ID, but it's a major issue. It's a major error. They will not process your FAFSA. So you need two IDs, one for the student and one for the parent. If you have two students going to college at the same time, create another ID for the other student. The IDs, by the way, are person specific. So if you have two students, you fill out one FAFSA for one student, one FAFSA for the other student. You log into the first student's account using their FSA ID. You guys can actually create the IDs today if you'd like. Okay. That being said, at halfway point of the FAFSA, this is what you guys are going to see. Here's going to ask you basically halfway through the FAFSA to now input the parent's information. They're going to ask you to type in the username and password you created. You can choose either parent, by the way. It doesn't matter which parent you choose, as long as you guys are married, obviously. If you guys are divorced or separated, you want to use the parent that the student is living with 51% of the time or more. I'm going to get more detail on that in a moment. You plug in the parent's login halfway through the student's FAFSA on this page here. You'll click on the bottom which says Link to IRS. And what it will do is it will bring you to a page, which is an IRS site that's connected to the U.S. Department of Education. It will then ask you on that page, please provide us with your address. I know it sounds pretty simple, but it must be the same address you have on your taxes. Now, when you're filling out the FAFSA form for this year's senior class, you guys will be using the 2020 taxes, okay? So this year's senior class, 2020 taxes you'll be using. For juniors, you'll be using the 2021 taxes, basically the tax year we're in right now. So halfway through the FAFSA, you'll upload your 2020 taxes by providing them the address. So make sure to have your taxes with you, because if your accountant or you, as far as the address, if you put 20 Smith Drive and you wrote the word drive out, you have to write the word drive out on the next page, the IRS part, or else it won't recognize your taxes. It won't let you upload them. But if it does recognize your address, because it'll automatically upload your taxes for 2020, and then basically your FAFSA in the world of financial aid is seen as basically like 99% correct. Now you want to make sure to do the IRS retrieval. That's what they call it, for both the parent and the student, if the student did taxes for 2020. So basically, in the next couple slides here, it's all going to be asked stuff like, right off the bat, everyone obviously wants to know what counts in the FAFSA, what doesn't count in the FAFSA. Let's discuss what counts right off the bat. They want to know about cash, savings, investments outside of retirement. Retirement assets on the FAFSA form does not count. So if you have a 401k or an IRA or any of those things, any retirement vehicles, Roths, so on and so forth, the asset amount you have in there does not count. What does count, and there is one question on the FAFSA form, and I'm fairly sure they're going to keep this question on the FAFSA form, is how much you contributed in that tax year towards your retirement. That amount, they do count. So any amount you contribute to your 401k or your IRA in the tax year 2020, they do want to know about that. The amount you have in total in your retirement account, They don't want to know about that. Your primary home does not count on the Fafsa form. Going forward, it still will not count on the Fafsa form. It's one change or not changing. However, if you have a second property, that second property does count and should be going on the Fafsa form as an asset, the amount of equity you have. If you also have, in the video I just did 2 weeks ago, does my house count towards financial aid? If you live in a multi-family house, part of your house does count. If you want more information, if you live in a multifamily or if you have rental property, very simple, just watch my video on does your house count on the Fafsa form. I go in depth. That's why I made all the videos, guys, because it's so much information. I could keep you guys on here for 20 hours, to be honest with you, but nobody wants to be on here longer than an hour, which is hopefully we can get everything done within the hour. But you want more information on the YouTube channel, other than just pressing play on and helping us, you can actually watch some of the videos. I give you guys a lot of content. Remember, I've been doing this 25 years. I've seen every question you can possibly deal with. Now, that being said, let's talk about what also counts. On the Fafsa form, on all the financial aid forms, by the way, they do count the 529 plans, the college savings plans, the plans that you have as a parent. Now, if you're not sure which account you have, whether it's a UTMA, UGMA, 529, state-sponsored, NJ Best, New York plan, etc. Technically, what they've done now is they've consolidated all the plans to basically be put into the parent asset section of everything. That's what they consolidated everything into. Now, as far as 529 plans, once again, all in the parents' names. So it goes in the parents section of the financial aid forms. The FAFSA, the CSS Profile, and the institutional forms you guys are filling out. So let's go to the next page here. And here I'm going to explain to you guys, two things here. This slide here is for everyone, seniors and juniors. This slide here is going to explain to you guys how they come up with your expected family contribution based on this year's FAFSA information calculation. Then I'm going to explain to you guys the changes we're going to make to this for next year. So for next year, when it counts for everybody, seniors and juniors, that's what I'll explain at the end of this slide. So right at the bat, I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. Right at the bat, students have no asset protection. What that basically means is any money they have in their name, it counts at 20%. So let's just do as an example. Your student has $1,000 in a checking account. You put that on the FAFSA form. They want 20% of that $1,000 or $200. That is part one of the 4 parts that are added together to come up with your family's expected family contribution for that student. Part number 2, students are allowed to make up to $6,500 before any money counts against them in the world of FAFSA. After $6,500, that amount basically is counted at 50 cents on the dollar. So if your student made $7,000, they back out $6,500. 50% of that $500 is left over, $250. That's part number 2 of the 4-part equation. Part number 3, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, because I wanted to give you some insight to kind of think about this as we get to this page, parents have what's known as a parent asset protection allowance. That basically means there's a certain amount of assets you guys have outside of retirement, like cash, savings, investments, CDs, money market stuff that's not in retirement savings. There's a certain amount that doesn't count in the equation. It used to be, equation was basically they took the age of the oldest parent in the household, because they ask you in the form what your birthdays are, the age of the oldest parent in the household, and they used to multiply that by 1,000. And that would give you your asset protection allowance. So if you were 50 years old, you had $50,000 of asset protection. So if all the money you had in the world was $30,000 in checking account, put it on the FAFSA as a parent asset, they don't count it. They've reduced this thing down like off the charts over the last 7 or 8 years. They just dropped it down. Now the asset protection allowance is roughly around $10,000. So it's not much, unfortunately. So any money you have over $10,000 in checking, savings, and so on and so forth outside of retirement, they count anything over that amount at a rate of 5.6%. And then parents' income. For parents' income is a sliding scale. The more you make, the more they expect you to contribute towards the cost of education. Now that sliding scale is basically between 22 to 47%. Now, everyone's always wondering, are we in the 30% to 40%? How do I figure this out? Well, it's fairly simple. If your income is roughly around $200,000, when I say income, I mean adjusted gross income. I'm also going to give you some calculators. You can go online, by the way, so you don't have to calculate this all in your mind or go crazy right now. I just go through these numbers so everyone understands how they work. Most of you guys, if you have an income of $200,000 or below, you will fall into that 22% mark. So if you make $100,000 adjusted gross, you're at $22,000. You make 200,000, you're at 44,000. Once you go above that 200 mark, that's when they start increasing the percentages, going higher and higher. So the more you make, obviously, the more you want to contribute towards the cost of the college education of your student. These four parts are added together to come up with your expected family contribution. Remember, next year it's going to be called the Student Aid Index. Here are the changes that are happening next year for October 22. The changes are going to be, as you see down the bottom down there, the parents' increase will be 20% on their income. So you guys can make basically 20% more before they start counting your income. Basically a 20% reduction. Students will have a 50% reduction in the amount they count. So basically, at the numbers you are now, as you start realizing, wait a minute, the amounts they're increasing are not that great. Because the reality is, for parents, you might get, if you're making $100,000, an extra $3,000 or $4,000 deduction of what they expect you to pay. So you might go from $22,000 to roughly maybe $20,000. For students, if you were paying, let's say, if you were making, let's say, I don't know, $10,000, so they expected you guys to pay roughly $3,500, they may expect you from the student's amount to pay $1,700 or $1,800. So the reality is they're indicating, and I'm just providing the verbiage they give us, that they are helping you out. But the reality, good, bad, or indifferent, is the families that have incomes of basically $45,000 and below, you're going to see a very small increase to Pell Grants and other things, SEOG, stuff like that from the federal government. Small increases, a few $100s. The middle-class families, unfortunately, you guys are going to get squeezed like crazy next year. I hate to say it, but it's just the reality. This is probably the worst equation they could have already, and the changes they made this year in reducing asset protections, but then making it even worse next year for middle-class families. Just being honest with you guys. That being said, this is the FAFSA way things are happening. Doesn't mean everything's falling by the wayside and going to hell kind of scenario. I'm going to give you guys the good and the bad of everything here. But from a FAFSA perspective, from my point of view, it's not helping out middle-class families whatsoever. It's not even helping out, obviously, high-income families, because the fact that most high-income families don't get any federal aid anyways, or state aid. Now that we talked about that, let's talk about what happens at the end of the FAFSA form after you submit the FAFSA form. So what you're all going to see here is this screen here, basically the confirmation screen at the end of the FAFSA. And for New York residents specifically, you guys will have a question on the right. You can see there it says, start your state application for New York state-based financial aid. Now this will be coming from the Higher Education Service Corporation. Now the Higher Education Service Corporation is essentially the group for the state that's going to give you state aid if you guys stay in the state of New York. Now, once you fill out the FAFSA form as part one for getting state aid, the second part is clicking on the Apply Now button there, and it's going to bring you over to the HESC website, which will then ask you somewhere between 45 to 50 questions in addition to the FAFSA form. These questions are used to see if you're eligible for state aid. And when you're filling out this form, you will need your state of New York tax return. Not just the federal form you fill out the FAFSA form, but also the state form to fill out the state required questions for the state of New York. Now, if you do fill this out, basically what will happen is this group covers a lot of different things as far as helping you out with state aid. On here you have TAP, Tuition Assistance Program, which is a lot of money you guys can get from the state of New York if you guys stay in state. There's a lot of grant money here. It will also start to provide you assistance with the EOF programs, Education Opportunity Funds. This is also the starting point for the Excelsior program for free in-state tuition, which New York started about 2 or 3 years ago. So obviously, between the TAP money that's available for you guys, Excelsior money, and Education Opportunity Fund money, which allows you guys to go to college for free as well, obviously you have to fill out the information for the Higher Education Service Corporation of New York, which is done at the end of the FAFSA form. You guys, once again, you guys click on the Apply Now, which will basically bring you to this website to then start filling out their questions. It's very important you do this, especially for New York State residents looking to stay in the state of New York, especially if you're eligible for Excelsior, because it's a big discount for you guys. Now let's move on to the next slide. Now that brings us to, we talked about the FAFSA. This is a form everyone does. Then we talked about the state of New Jersey. The third form, which some of you out there fill out, which I mentioned before, not all of you, is called the CSS Profile form. The CSS Profile form is found here on the College Board site. On the College Board site, you will actually log in using your student's SAT account information. So if your student already signed up for the SATs and created an account, you don't have to create another account to do the CSS. You just log into the student's account. It's very simple. You go on to the College Board site, and on the College Board site, All you guys need to do is go over where it says, click on that link, and on there it'll say CSS Profile. It's the third, I believe it's the third tab there. Now, when you're doing the FAFSA form, obviously there's 100 or so questions. I mentioned that. The CSS Profile is way more in depth. The CSS Profile is over 400 questions. In some cases, it could range up to almost 500 plus questions for some of you, depending on how many colleges want the CSS Profile. So right at the bat, first thing you need to do, figure out, do I need to do the CSS Profile? First place you can figure out if I need to do the CSS Profile, right here on College Board. Also on there, they're going to give you a list of every college that requires a CSS. If your school's not on there, you don't need to do it. Also, when you're filling out the CSS Profile, on that form, it's going to indicate by page 3 what schools you want this to go to. So if you indicate on here, I want this to go to UConn or Rutgers or UDel or Penn State or Ohio State, it stops you right there in your tracks after 30 or so questions because these schools don't need the form. Now, this form, unlike the FAFSA, is a lot more in depth. This form will ask you everything the FAFSA asks you plus your primary home. It's going to want to know on the CSS of your primary home, when you bought it, how much you bought it for, how much it's worth, how much you're paying monthly. Is there a first mortgage? Is there a second mortgage? It's going to ask you all these questions. So it goes very in depth. It will also ask you on here about your retirement savings. Now, here's the interesting thing about the CSS Profile. The FAFSA, since it uploads your taxes, it has a lot more information it has than the CSS Profile does on you, essentially. Plus, they don't count your home on the FAFSA. They don't count your retirement. So the FAFSA is almost all kind of just plugging in number scenario. There is some nuance to it, but the CSS has a lot bigger of a threshold of error, which basically means they're more on the honor system because they're not going to ask you, everyone always asks, how do they check our retirement? How do they check our home value, so on and so forth. They're not going to ask you, by the way, for your mortgage statement. They're not going to ask you for your bank accounts. They're not going to ask you for your brokerage accounts. So it's more of the honor system per se. And obviously I'm being recorded. I'm going to upload this for you guys to watch and everyone else to watch. So I can't go into in depth by what I mean by the honor system. But if you don't understand what I mean by the honor system, I'm going to give you my contact information at the end. You can just text me or email me and I'll explain to you kind of what I mean by the honor system. On the CSS, they're also going to ask you in some cases for the car you drive, the car your student drives. They're going to ask what kind of insurance you have on the house, on yourself. It goes very in depth. Also on here, it will ask you specifically, do you have an annuity? So those who were told, good, bad, or different, I've heard the story before. I've been doing 25 years. If we put money into annuity, it doesn't show up. Not actually true. If we put money into a trust, it doesn't show up. Not actually true. If we put our business, our real estate into a business, doesn't show up. Actually not true. So a lot of stuff that a lot of people are told, good, bad, or indifferent, not actually true. This is why I tell parents all the time, if you're uncertain about something, you can just, you can ask us. I even tell parents all the time, if you're watching one of our videos, if you watch any of my videos, the first 2 seconds I say, if you have any questions, ask me, and I'll actually answer all your questions in the comment section because it helps the YouTube channel. Now, one thing that a lot of parents ask about is how do we figure out if the college is affordable? Do we have to hire a consultant like you, Ed? Do we have to, do all these things? No one has to hire anybody. I actually even have a YouTube video about why you don't need to hire anybody. So if you see my videos, I have videos about no, you don't need to hire a college consultant. And I am a college consultant. That being said, if you want to figure out how much college costs you or how generous a college is, very simple. All you need to do is Google net price calculator and the school's name. And it will actually provide you with a calculator. The reason I have College Board on here is because most of the net price calculators, by the way, are on College Board. Now, the net price calculators themselves provide you with the opportunity of knowing, in most cases, number one, how much college costs, number two, how generous that college can be from grant perspective, and in some cases, number three, they will even show you what kind of colleges can offer you scholarship money based on your student's academic situation. Let me give you an example. I actually did a net price calculator, and we also have a video, by the way, on our channel about net price calculators and EFC calculators if you want more in-depth stuff. Here I did net price calculator for Harvard. I just went on Harvard and just basically Googled Harvard net price calculator, and I did it. It takes about 5 minutes. It's very easy. It showed me their breakdown of their costs, which is one benefit of the net price calculator, as you see on the left. I plugged in that we're a family of 4 with one student going off to college, that we as parents make $100,000, and that we have $50,000 in savings. Harvard came back and said, well, based on your situation, your cost to go to our school here at Harvard is $11,950. We're going to give you over $64,000 of grant money. I know Harvard calls it scholarships, but it's not scholarship money. Scholarships is merit-based. Grants is need-based, but it's just terminology difference, but they're both free money, so it's the same thing. So you're probably thinking, everyone watching is thinking, that's great, Ed, but maybe one of us here is going to get our kid into Harvard. So how does this help us? Very simple. Harvard is not the only school that's this generous. Ithaca is very generous. BU is very generous. Loyola in Maryland is very generous. Actually, all 4 Loyolas are very generous, to be honest with you. Case Western is very generous. Bucknell is very generous. There's a ton of schools out there that don't have to be the hardest to get into 2% acceptance rate type scenario for your student to get a lot of financial assistance. Providence is very generous. I could probably go on for half an hour, to be honest with you, but I'm going to stop here. But there's a lot of schools out there that are very generous. And to figure it out, you don't need to hire anybody. Just do the net price calculators. That being said, let's talk about major changes. Divorce, separation, and being remarried. As of now, this year's FAFSA, for senior parents, you get to, if you're on the FAFSA form and you're filling it out, if you're separated or divorced, this year's FAFSA is the last year you're allowed to choose who you want to choose, which parent, mom or dad, to fill out the FAFSA form. Starting next year for divorced or separated parents, you can only fill out the FAFSA form using the parents that use the student as a dependent on their taxes. Which means if you guys switch back and forth between the tax returns, like one year you claim the student, the other year they claim the student, they're going to technically, the way the system is set up right now, the verbiage is whoever claims a student is the parent that must be used for the FAFSA form. You're no longer, after this year, going to be allowed to choose which parent's income you want to use, because as many of you may or may not realize, the FAFSA form, whichever parent you choose, it eliminates the other parent's financial information. So if you indicate they live with mom 50% of the time, now dad's information, his income and assets, those questions are erased from the FAFSA. Starting next year, same situation, but you're not going to be able to choose. So the tax year you guys are doing now, if you're divorced or separated and filing separately, whoever claims the student is the one they're going to have to use to do the FAFSA form. So as you're doing your taxes this year, if you're divorced or separated and you're going to be filing separately, make sure you kind of figure this stuff out, because it does have a huge impact. Now, if you're remarried, good, bad, or indifferent, whoever claims a student, if you're remarried, both the biological parent and the step parents, your information does go on the form, both this year and next year. Now, making matters even more confusing for those watching, good, bad, or different, if you're doing the CSS Profile form, most CSS Profile schools right off the bat count both parents, regardless if you're separated, if you're divorced, if you're remarried, it counts you guys no matter what on the CSS Profile, both parents. Which means if you are divorced or separated, you have to do 2 CSS profiles, one for the custodial parent, one for the non-custodial parent. If you have questions about that, you can email me, you can text me, so on and so forth, because doing the non-custodial is a lot more complicated. I could probably spend 20 minutes explaining to you how to do the non-custodial parent CSS profile. It's very, very weird the way they do it. Another change, a lot of you have heard, and I probably got 10 questions from you guys about this. This is why I already had it in the presentation, but I wanted to make sure I told you guys in the beginning and put it in yellow. These are the 2 main topics I'll be talking about at the end. As of now, so this year still counts. If you have 2 students going off to college at the same time, whatever your expected family contribution number is for one student, it's divided in half if you have 2 students going at the same time. So obviously, as you see on the equation here, if we have 1 student going off to college and that college costs $35,000, and the FAFSA, we fill it all out, and the FAFSA says we can pay $20,000, we're paying $20,000 for that 1 student, we have $15,000 of financial aid space for the college to help us. If the second student goes in, if both students, by the way, go to $35,000 colleges, by the way, they don't have to go to the same college, by the way. I'm just using the same $35,000 to make the math easy. Both students go to $35,000 colleges, $70,000 in total. You fill out the FAFSA, it still tells you you're paying $20,000. Difference is you're paying $10,000 towards student 1 education and $10,000 towards students 2's education. So you're still paying the $20,000, it's just divided. So student 1 goes from having $15,000 financial aid space to $25,000 in financial aid space. It increases it. The FAFSA starting next year is going to eliminate, which means obviously that's a big, big issue for a lot of families. And a lot of families have been asking us, how does this affect us? Should we start looking at schools that are cheaper? And the answer is no. This is something no one's talking about, but I'm going to talk about it here. You do not change your college list for this one reason. The FAFSA form is used for 3 different things. The federal government to give you Pell Grants and student loans and some other stuff. The states to give you state aid, and also for the schools to decide how much money they want to give you. Now, for the most expensive schools, the $80,000, $70,000 colleges, as I mentioned before, most of these schools use the CSS Profile. The CSS Profile is not following the new guidelines the federal government's going into. So they're very likely going to give you that divide for their own money. When the schools on the higher end give you money, they utilize a CSS Profile form, which is still providing the discount. It's not 50-50, it's like a 40% discount, but still a huge discount. Let's talk about the errors. The major errors on the admissions and financial aid, very simple. So first name, last name, social, and birthday. Those are the 4 biggest errors made on both admissions and financial aid. On all admissions forms, it will ask you, do you want to provide us your social security number as a student? The answer is not, do you want to? Provide the social. This is how they connect all the forms, by the way. Your financial aid forms or your admissions forms, they're connected through the student's social. So always put the student's social on the applications for admission. Also check there's no nicknames being used. And obviously, the student should know their birthday. If you're filling out the financial aid forms, you have to know when you're filling out the financial aid forms, specifically when you're creating the IDs, you must know the person's first name, last name, social, and birthday. I know you're probably wondering, how do you not know your name? This has happened to me multiple times during meetings when I help out parents with the Fafsa Form, because I do hundreds of Fafsas every year. If you are remarried, is your legal name changed on your social security card? Then you have to use your new name, obviously. Obviously, no nickname. So I'm Edward. So I don't use Ed on the forms. I use Edward on the forms. Birthdays. If you don't know the student's birthday, then know your birthday. If you don't know your spouse's birthday, if you've been lying to your spouse about your birthday, it's either time to come clean or just do the IDs by yourself and don't tell them you're doing the IDs. But the first name, last name, social, and birthday must match. They have to be what's on the social security card. That being said, let's talk for both juniors and seniors. Now, obviously, us being trapped at home, I mean, my wife and I have a 1-year-old, so obviously we haven't been going anywhere really. A lot of students have been on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and so on and so forth. What you need to realize is this. If you're in the realm of admissions right now as a senior student, and your student is putting stuff on Facebook or Instagram that's either politically charged or they think it's funny, but you don't think it's so funny, you have to make their accounts private. You just do. Admissions officers are going on the social media pages. They're even making, like, the coalition itself is now basically like a new social media page where you can post photos and everything else. The last thing you want to do is post a photo or like a tweet or do something that basically annoys somebody, and then all of a sudden you're not accepted at college. Maybe you never even knew you were going to be accepted, and then they took you off the acceptance list. I have a lot of admissions representatives that I know, because I've been doing this 25 plus years. I know a lot of them. I know some of the highest end admissions officers, and they all tell me the same thing. They probably won't tell you this, but they tell me this. They go on all the social media pages. This is the number one fact and the reason why they do this. To give an example, this year's freshman class, 21-22, NYU received 100,000 applications, okay? The reality is, the reason they're going on your social media page is to find reasons to reject you, because they don't have enough spots to fill with every one of these students. Harvard, Princeton, Yale, every year rejects half their perfect SAT and ACT scores. Okay, so that should just give you an idea. If your student's putting anything on social media that you don't think is funny or you think it might be offensive to anybody for any reason, just make it private. If your student says they don't want to make it private because they want to build a fan base or whatever, don't pay the phone bill. It's really that important. I've had admissions officers tell me, the kid was in, we looked on TikTok or Instagram, whatever they had, the kid was out. This has happened, not just last year, but the year before, and it's going to keep moving forward because there's too many applications for spots available. That being said, let's talk scams. If you do follow our YouTube channel, if you like, you can also follow our YouTube channel by just subscribing. We've had 3 different videos about different scams that happened over the last year. There was the Rutgers scam, there's now the forbearance loan scam, and then we also had the scholarship scam last year. If you want more insight on how to avoid these scams, 2 things you can do. Down below on the screen here, studentaid.gov resources, that link down there is probably the number one place I would go to, a great educational site from the U.S. Department of Education about avoiding scams. Second place you can go, on our YouTube channel, we have 3 specific YouTube videos designated to all the scams out there. I mean, all of them. The loan scams, the scholarship scams. I talk about all the different scams and avoiding them. So I don't want to obviously spend more time here, but either go here to this website or just go onto our YouTube channel and just type in, when you get to our YouTube channel, scam, and then it shows you the 3 different videos for the scams, okay? That being said, here is what I'm talking about for both this year and next year. For parents that are wondering about, should we worry about the colleges that are very expensive because of the FAFSA changes? In my eyes, I wouldn't worry. And remember, I've been doing this 25 years. To give an example, Cornell costs $79,443, everything included. Let's just call it the $80,000 college, basically. Let's say you fill out all the financial aid forms, this year, next year, etc. And the financial aid forms say you can pay $10,000. Cornell is automatically going to give you $69,443. What your need is, Cornell will give you all that need in grant money. Cornell is one of a handful of schools, one of about a dozen colleges that do not provide federal loans. So even if you do the FAFSA form, they won't provide you the federal loan unless you ask for the federal loan. of $5,500. They'll actually basically swap out the federal loan they give you from the FAFSA of $5,500 for a freshman in grant money. So the reality is, most of the colleges I talked about in the beginning, and I told you guys, don't look at the sticker price. Do the net price calculators. Do the equations. I did the Harvard one as well for you guys. And once again, it doesn't have to be the top tier schools. Cornell in this indication basically is going to cost you $10,000, which basically speaking, at $10,000, if you're looking at Rutgers, the reality is if you have a $10,000 EFC, Rutgers is not going to give you any money off. Unless you're getting scholarship money, Rutgers is basically going to cost $35,000 all in, good, bad, or different. So essentially close to 4 times the cost of Cornell, even though Cornell is technically almost 3 times the cost of Rutgers. So never look at sticker price. Let's talk about what's going to happen after you guys do all the financial aid forms and get accepted. You guys will receive these. These are called the financial aid award letters. These letters here will break down the college's cost, how much they think you have in financial need, as well as the scholarships, the grants, the loans, and everything else. These here are the starting point for appealing. Everyone always asks, when can we start appealing? You can start appealing and ask for more money the moment you get the award letters, because the award letters is the starting point. You know what the school's offering you. Once you have the award letter, you can start appealing. Now, what many of you need to understand, and I made a video, and this is actually the screenshot of the video. This is actually one of the first videos we made back over a year ago. So, it's not as high tech and savvy and cut and stuff and so on as the videos we have now, but this video is about 25, 26 minutes long. It explains to you how to do a financial aid appeal. And many of you are thinking, oh God, 30 minutes for a financial aid appeal video. The reason I do a 30-minute video is because I go through every single possible scenario of an appeal. If you want, you can watch videos on YouTube. I think they're 10 minutes long where the person says, appeal to every school no matter what. But I'm guaranteeing you 1 out of every 3 of you here is going to lose money because the person doing that video has no idea what they're talking. And this is why I say that. When you appeal to a school, 3 things happen. Most people think 2 things happen, but 3 things happen when you appeal to a school. If you want, you can appeal any scholarship money, nothing will happen. But for grant money, first thing will happen is they're going to say, okay, we like your appeal, whatever you wrote, so on and so forth. We're going to give you more money, more grant money. Second thing they're going to say to you is, thanks for the appeal. We appreciate it. Nice try. We're not going to give you any more money. Third thing they say to you is, we like your appeal because we found stuff in here you guys didn't tell us about before. Guess what? We're going to take away money from you. Yes, the college can take away grant money. This is what most people don't talk. This is what drives me nuts. You don't just do an appeal no matter what. If the appeal brings up something you forgot to tell them or something they didn't notice before, they can take away your grant money. I've seen students that have gotten $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 in grants have it all taken away by doing an appeal, trying to get an extra $1,000 or $2,000. Imagine that situation. You had $40,000 off. You didn't appeal because someone told you it was a good idea and it was a terrible idea, and you lost $40,000. So don't do an appeal unless you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't need to hire anyone. Once again, I've given you the roadmap for free. It's 30 minutes long, but it's 30 minutes long so you don't lose money. That being said, let's talk loans. Everyone who does the Fafsa form, every one of you, your students will receive a $5,500 federal loan. The Fafsa form typically gives you a $5,500 loan for most of you. $3,500 of it will be subsidized, which means the interest on it will not be growing. The government will be paying for that interest while your student's in school. The other $2,000 of the $5,500 will be unsubsidized, which basically means the government will not be paying that interest. It will be growing on itself. In addition to the federal loan, the $5,500 FAFSA loan, which all you need to do is fill out the FAFSA and they give it to you. You don't have to take it, by the way. You can decline the FAFSA loan, but they have to offer it to you because you did the FAFSA. Second place to look for loans are private lenders. The Sallie Mae's, the Nail Nets, so on and so forth, College Ave, the Laurel Ave, and all the rest of the different loans out there. This is the best place to look for loans right now because interest rates are still low enough where the private lenders are right now. Most interest rates on the private lenders is starting right around 1.2, 1.25. On the federal loans, unfortunately, like the plus loan I have here, we're talking about rates 5.3%. with origination fees. So right now, I still like the private lenders better than I do like the Parent Plus loan. Difference, by the way, between a private loan and the Parent Plus loan, a private loan will typically require a credit score of roughly around 680 or above. A plus loan, you can get a plus loan for a credit score of 620 or in that range. If you want more information, we do have videos just on the private loans on the YouTube channel, so I don't want to get too far into it. But right now, I like better the private loans is number one ranking because they have start interest rates at 1%, basically. Second, I like the New Jersey class loan here in New Jersey, which has interest rates roughly around 3% to 4%. So that's the second one I like as far as ranking. And the third option I like, just in case you're not getting good rates from these two guys, is the Parent Plus loan in the 5.3% range. If you have any questions, if you need more information, if you want more help, sure you want a newsletter, perfectly fine. You can just email me. I'm going to give you my email in one more slide. You can just email me. Hi, Ed. I have a 12th grader from so-and-so high school, and please send me the newsletter. It goes out every month. It tells you guys what you need to be doing every single month. Our newsletters talk about everything. Admissions, testing, financial aid. It just says, senior parent, senior student, this is what you need to do. Junior parent, junior student, this is what you need to do. So it's a one-page thing. It's very easy. If you want the newsletter, just email me. Here are the scholarship searches, where to go for scholarships. First place, obviously, the admissions office, which I kind of gave you a roadmap already, talking about how to figure out scholarships, where to go for the college is the admissions office. This is where you need to be going. This is the person you're negotiating with for the scholarships as well. Online scholarships, the ones I like the best are, I like FastWeb, FinAid, and CapEx. Those are the 3 scholarship searches online I like. Those are all free. You don't have to pay for anything. And of course, locally, the scholarships online, through your guidance office, obviously the local scholarships have the least competition. That being said, once again, we do have a scholarship. Our goal is to give away $15,000. If you guys, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if you want to help us, the best way to helping us, go to the YouTube channel. If you don't want to do anything but the bare minimum, which is perfectly fine, I understand that. All I need you to do is go to the YouTube channel. If you want to help out the bare minimum, which helps out a lot, believe it or not, just go to the YouTube channel, go to our channel, press play all, and just let the videos play. Here's our contact information. This is my contact information. That's my cell phone number. The easiest way to get a hold of me for anything, if you need help with the financial aid forms, if you have a question, any question, just send me a text message. It's the fastest way to get a hold of me. The second fastest way to get a hold of me is through email. It's the company email. The third way to get a hold of me is by calling me. I never answer the phone, by the way. For you guys, if you want help, if you need help, if you have any questions, very simple. Just text me. Hey, Ed, I was at the presentation, blah, 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 blah. Here's my question. I can answer your question probably in about 15 seconds because I already have the answer. Because all you guys ask me the same questions over and over again, which is perfectly fine. You know, my life is kind of like Groundhog's Day, but it is what it is. That being said, though, after I answer your question, by the way, I'm going to send you a link to the YouTube channel. And I'm going to say the same thing to you guys. You ask me a question, here's the answer. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll answer any questions you have. By the way, here's our link to our YouTube channel. Please click the play all box and watch as many videos as possible. It helps our scholarship fund. Just letting you know now, because I send that to everyone. I've been sending that to everyone for the last 4 months since the scholarship basically was in my mind, something I wanted to start. But that being said, anyone who wants to jump off, we're completely done. Anyone who has questions, just ask away. I will be answering your questions until we finish. Once again, thank you everyone for jumping on today. I appreciate it.